Welcome to the Sport and Recreation Alliance webinar introducing the Voluntary Code of Good Governance for the Sport and Recreation sector. For the purposes of this presentation, we will simply call this the Code. By creating the presentation, the Alliance aims to provide you with background information on the Code and guidance on how to adopt it. You will also be signposted to support and resources to help your organisation implement the Code to maximum effect, strengthening your sport or recreation and planning for sustainable success. So what is sports governance? National occupational standards have been developed by the Sector Skills Council, Skills Active, in partnership with the Alliance and national governing bodies. Sports governance is to lead and manage an organisation so that it creates, maintains and improves the structure and environment in which sport and physical activity is delivered. This definition has been uniquely developed for sport and recreation. However, the fundamental nature of governance transcends sector, and the responsibility to lead and manage an organisation effectively applies to charities, companies and associations of all sizes and functions, sporting and non-sporting. So why good governance in sport? Governance itself is not a new concept. However, there has been considerably greater attention paid to the leadership and governance of sport in recent years. From corruption scandals to financial failures, sport has been in the spotlight too often for the wrong reasons, and it is these issues that have led to an increase in the requirements placed on sport and recreation bodies. Self-regulation. Thus far, regulation has not been introduced for sport beyond the statutory duties contained in existing legislation, such as health and safety, employment and equality. Regulation has been discussed at ministerial levels on the basis that sport is unwilling or unable to address governance issues. However, what has become clear since the introduction of the Code is that sport and recreation organisations are very much committed to improvement, and by implementing the Code on a voluntary basis have issued a public statement of intent. Sustainable development. It is beholden on the leadership of an organisation, be that a voluntary board or paid executives, to establish a long-term vision and plan for that vision, considering resources and timeframes. Without this, it is possible that the organisation can become very short-termist, managing crises only on a day-by-day, week-by-week basis. It is important to plan long-term and to ensure that the organisation is sustainable and successful for that period. It also means that the individuals involved in that planning process can have confidence that the organisation itself will be sustainable and successful, long beyond their period and their contribution. Reassurance to stakeholders. The expectation of funders, commercial partners, participants, members and all those involved with the sport or recreation are very high. In a number of ways we often talk about consumers or customers, and it's important that the leadership of the organisation, the board and the senior executives do put that long-term plan in place and can communicate this to those with an interest in the organisation. Why do we have a good governance code if everybody knows what needs to be done? Well, in simple terms, even if you're on the right track, you'll get run over if you just sit there, as Rod just said. This means, in effect, you can be well run, you can be inspirationally led, you may not be facing a crisis. However, it is still important and it's still the right thing to do, to reflect, to review, and to be prepared to change and improve, taking account of the needs and wishes of your stakeholders and also the various changes in the landscape. Improvement is not just about managing difficulties. Why was the Code created? Back in 2003, Deloitte created a report, the Investing in Change report, which looked at governance of the sport and recreation sector. At the core of this was a recommendation that there should be one single vision of good governance for the sector. And the Code, in drawing on this and other reports, has aimed to create that one single vision, regardless of whether an organisation receives public funds, where it is in the UK, and what size it might be. The Dutton Inquiry report was produced in 2009. Again, there was a recommendation that organisations take ownership of their governance to prevent regulation, and we've already touched on this. Through the code, many organisations have been able to become actively engaged in governance, taking steps to improve and doing so visibly. Regrettably, sport and recreation organisations have experienced preventable crises. These may be financial or reputational, management of resources. Either way, when there is scrutiny, organisations have to take seriously their responsibilities, and the old adage that prevention is better than cure is most definitely a truism in this case. The landscape for sport has changed considerably in the last 10 years, and public investment is at its highest. This rightfully comes with conditions, and the funders, in particular the home country sports councils and UK Sport, have placed governance requirements on all those organisations, small and large, if they are in receipt of public funds. By adopting the code, these organisations have been able to meet the governance requirements and standards, the key criteria, whilst at the same time demonstrating to their stakeholders they do so voluntarily, not just because they're required to. What is the code? It's a voluntary code of practice for sport and recreation organisations. It's not linked to public funding, and it's not designed to fit one type of organisation. We operate in a very diverse sector, with major games and sports, professional sports, water recreation, movement and dance, outdoor recreation. The code has been designed to be applicable and relevant to all. It contains 7 principles. Within the revised document, principles have been supplied with practical considerations, some thinking points, and also case studies, all of which enable each organisation to learn from one another and to be able to take a methodical approach to governance. It's a dynamic document, so for each of those major spectator sports, for the outdoor recreation, for movement and dance, for charities and for companies, they can each self-reflect, assess their own situation in terms of governance, and then use the document in a dynamic way to determine what good governance looks like for them. It could be a prioritising of principles, recognising that sport and recreation bodies are at different stages of evolution. What impact has the code had on sport and recreation? The original code was launched in 2011, and so we are some 3 years down the line, and the Alliance believed it would be a worthwhile exercise to consider this impact. So in August 2014, the Alliance commissioned Birkbeck University to carry out an independent impact study by interviewing and surveying sport and recreation bodies that had signed up to the code since 2011. In addition, a number of organisations that hadn't signed up were interviewed and surveyed. The results showed that 77% of respondents stated by implementing the code this had had a positive impact on their whole organisation. 94% stated the code had been effective or very effective in identifying good practice. A further 95% of respondents stated the code had been effective or very effective in assisting good governance. Overall, the results of this independent study have been overwhelmingly positive, and the Alliance, along with its partners and its members, is pleased to be able to take this work forward based on the good work that's gone beyond. And credit must go to all the organisations that have signed up to the code to help make this happen. So what have other organisations done? How can we learn? Here's an example from the Amateur Swimming Association, who implemented the code with a focus on the second principle, defining and evaluating the role of the board. The ASA used the code to review its governance, with facilitated board sessions and also consulting across the sport. Swimming in England has a membership of over 200,000, so it's a very complex and large organisation. As a result of the board sessions and consultation, ASA identified a need to diversify the skills around the board table, and this was to reflect the nature of the organisation, but in particular its commercial operations, as well as its role as a national governing body in developing the sport itself. What was proposed was 2 boards: an ASA governing board, which would be responsible for swimming and the governance of the sport, and then an ASA group board, which would separate the duties and enable this group to be responsible for the commercial activities and running the business. Due process was followed and a resolution taken to the ASA AGM in 2013, where these changes were approved by the membership. Following this, terms of reference were developed and the skills-based membership for both of the boards was established, giving consideration to electoral and recruitment processes. The impact of this is that both boards have a clear understanding of the ways in which they contribute to the organisation. Having been through this process of evaluation and then redefining the functions, they have now found a model that works best for the size and complexity of the business, as well as ensuring that governance of the sport is still at the heart of its operations. By way of another example, Hockey Wales adopted the code with a focus on the 4th principle, which is objectivity, a balanced, inclusive and skilled board. Hockey Wales used the code to ensure the NGB was equipped to lead the sport. And with a specific focus on its board, Hockey Wales developed a competency and skills framework for the directors, thereby ensuring that the right skills, experience, qualifications and expertise were around the table. This was followed by a comprehensive evaluation for the existing membership and for new directors as they arrived, giving an assessment of their skills and the contribution they can make. As a result of this, a new recruitment process was developed and published. And this was important not only to alert the membership and stakeholders of the work that Hockey Wales had undertaken, moreover, it widened the talent pool, alerting people within and beyond sport to the opportunities that existed on their board. An independent chair has been appointed for a 3-year term. This not only meets the objectivity set out in the 4th principle, it provides an opportunity for Hockey Wales to refresh its board as it's introduced limits on the number of terms. The impact of this is that the board now has a full complement of elected and openly recruited directors. Through the elections, the voice of hockey players in Wales can be heard at board level, whilst at the same time the organisation is able to reach out beyond hockey and recruit the skills that are needed to run the business. This has led to improved clarity of roles, far greater engagement from the board members themselves, having been through the process, and of course through that wider communication and increased confidence in the board. So why is the Alliance leading this work? The Sport and Recreation Alliance is a representative body for the sector and exists to champion, to lead and to enable sport and recreation bodies. This means that the Alliance can operate as the voice for the sector. In addition, it should lead by example, and finally by developing resources, training, programmes and initiatives. It equips and enables sport and recreation organisations to plan for the future. By bringing the sector together through initiatives or events, the Alliance can create momentum and support the positive change in a number of areas, not just governance, but also by bringing its expertise in the form of research, policy, resources and guidance. There are some 350 members of the Sport and Recreation Alliance, which also has a number of stakeholders and partners. And through this vast network, the organisation can promote and share the best practice and innovation created by those involved with its work, whether it's the Voluntary Code of Good Governance or through divisions. So how would you sign up to the Voluntary Code? Firstly, build understanding at board level, not just of the code, but also of the benefits and the implications for your organisation. You may want to prioritise. You may want to create a plan around governance. Whatever steps you take, it's important that board members take responsibility for this. On request, the Alliance can visit your board and help explain that. Next, make sure that the governance improvements you plan to take are integrated into your organisation's normal planning processes. For example, your organisation's strategic plan. This will engage different parts of the organisation so many people can be involved in the process. However, as we know, it is important to have leadership, effective leadership of any initiative. So identify an individual who can galvanise the organisation, monitor progress and keep driving the change. Then complete the Voluntary Code sign-up form. This is available on the Sport and Recreation website, and you can submit it to the governance email address. Once this is in place, you should consider how you communicate your commitment. Your stakeholders, your members, participants, coaches and partners will be interested to hear not just what steps you've taken, but why you've taken them. And as we said before, it's not about being in crisis. This is a commitment to continuous improvement. The Alliance is able to offer tailored one-to-one consultancy support for any organisation that signs up to the code, and this can be a presentation at your board, or equally it can be that step-by-step diagnostic and facilitated improvement. There are voluntary code workshops and webinars where individual sport and recreation bodies can come together, share what they've learned, what they've achieved, and learn from one another. The Sport and Recreation Alliance website also includes the Smart Sport online resources. This is a vast array of policies, exemplars and guidance materials to help you at board level and senior exec or senior voluntary level to develop your governance. The Alliance Directors Club was an initiative launched in 2014. It provides support to existing and aspiring board members, which includes networking events, webinars, articles on governance developments, and also alerts about board positions. Alongside the Alliance Directors Club, there is specific training which the Alliance can deliver with partners from other sectors. This includes the Institute of Directors. This two-day training course has been designed specifically for sporting organisations that are registered as companies. The course provides details of legislation, the roles, responsibilities, and the practical application of these in a sporting environment. In addition, the Alliance works closely with the National Council of Voluntary Organisations, and a one-day training course has been developed specifically for sporting trustees. Having signed up to the code, you might also want to access the Alliance events, not just the workshops and webinars, but at the flagship Leadership Convention, which is the major annual conference for British sport. The Alliance works in partnership with a number of organisations, including sports councils, and code signatories may find it valuable to attend events specifically focusing on governance, for example, the Finance and Governance Forum. Finally, I'd like to thank you for joining this webinar, and if you'd like more information or have any questions, then please visit the Sport and Recreation